I consider myself someone who enjoys drawing backgrounds, but whenever I say that I like drawing backgrounds, I receive some incredible comments like these, which inspired me to make today's video on how to draw 3 easy backgrounds that anyone can add to their art. Hi, my name is Oyun Orka, a VTuber who tries to draw, and for today, I'll be sharing how to turn this character drawing with a white void background into these 3 super easy backgrounds. So without further ado, let's get straight into the drawing demonstration. For the demo drawing, I'm going to go about it how most people might approach a character drawing, to not think about the background and just draw a typical half body. If you're following along, you can use any character drawing you've done in the past without a background, or draw a new piece. Any headshot, half body, or knee up will work great for this tutorial. But for a full body drawing, if the feet are visible, you'll need to understand perspective a little bit better in order to place the character properly in the background. While I won't be covering it in this video, if you want to learn more about complex perspective and backgrounds from professionals, you're in luck, thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across illustration, animation, design, productivity, and more. Using Skillshare, you can improve your skill and learn more in so many different topics, including background art. Recently, they also launched new class topics around creative careers and creative inspiration, as well as the feature to be able to search for classes by program. So if you're ever wanting to learn a new program or expand skill sets in an existing one you use already, you can do that through Skillshare. If you want to learn how to draw colorful painterly backgrounds in perspective, the 2D Backgrounds class by Taniko Pantoja is a great class that I really enjoyed taking. Or if you want to learn more about drawing fundamentals for backgrounds, like perspective, the Drawing a Detailed Background course by Kyle Petchak is a more extensive course that dives into common perspective grids and how to apply that through drawing a complex Times Square scene. And if you want to learn more about how to draw environment art, the Environment Art Concept Painting class by Siobhan Toomey has been an incredible resource so far, breaking down foreground, middle ground, and background, as well as reasoning for lighting and compositional decisions. So far, I've really enjoyed all the classes that I've taken on Skillshare. If you'd like to take those classes and many others, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today! So now that we've finished drawing the base character, let's get into the first background, which is a blue sky and white clouds background. So to start off, I'll go ahead and make a new layer below the character, and then just pick a blue color and then fill that entire layer. Next, I'll adjust the hue slightly to pick a more cyan color and then lighten the color a little bit, and then just use airbrush on the bottom half of the canvas to just brighten this up a little bit. While it's pretty subtle, the slight gradient allows it to give more of an effect of a bright blue sky better. Once we have the sky base, I'll go ahead and draw in some clouds. So drawing clouds doesn't have to be super complex, especially if the character is covering most of the canvas anyways. Here I'm using a textured brush and just making these circular shapes to block in the clouds. If you're struggling with how to draw clouds, you can also look at photos you've taken in the past, or just look up cloud photos. Now that we have a base shape for our white clouds, I'll also go ahead and alpha lock this cloud layer and then just choose a slightly off-white color. This isn't very noticeable, especially if you're watching this from a mobile screen, but because you rarely see pure white out in nature, I like to adjust it so that you don't really see pure white for the base colors. Although later when I apply lighting effects, there might be some pure white visible there. Once again, I'm using a textured brush, and since the lighting is coming from the right side of the canvas, I'll make sure to reflect that in the cloud shadows. When drawing the cloud shadows, essentially I'm just drawing these roundish C shapes as I block in the shadows. I also like to add some white highlights to the clouds as well, and then constantly color pick back and forth between the shadow color and the white cloud color. If you're struggling to draw these shadow shapes, here I'll go ahead and make a clearer demo on the side so it's not blocked by the character as much. When drawing clouds, I like to use a brush with really high pressure sensitivity and then just making C shapes over and over again depending on the direction of where the light is coming from. I'll vary the pressure on the pen so I get thicker or thinner strokes depending on how much pressure I put on the pen. If you don't want your clouds covered in this much shadow, you can essentially just use the same method but using thinner strokes and lighter pen pressure. When drawing cloud shadows, I like to use 2 main colors for the cloud shadows, a darker blue and a lighter blue. Because the sky is bright blue in this drawing, the shadows should reflect that, so instead of using a solid gray, I'm using a gray that has a bit of blue mixed in. I like to have the dark bluish gray take on more of the sky color, and the mid-tone gray to take on a more neutral grayish tone. So back to the drawing, I'll go ahead and block in the cloud shadows. While the brush I'm using right now is more hard-tipped, if you'd like your clouds to look big and fluffy, it's nice to use a more painterly or textured brush. Here, I'm using my Hard Clouds 2 brush from my Nature brush pack set. You can download it on the Clip Studio Asset Store using the link in the description. Another detail I like to add is beneath the clouds, you can add some shadows. This is done just to make it look like there's more clouds off in the horizon where you can't see it and it's covered by the main cloud. This helps to add a little bit of dimension to the drawing. I'll go ahead and refine some more details on the clouds, and another thing that I love to add for cloud backgrounds is contrails. This can be achieved by just making a white streak somewhere along the sky connecting to the clouds. And while we're pretty much done here, you can add some final touches like white birds flying in the sky, or some mountains or sea in the background to ground the character a little bit better. Finally, I'll make a new layer, and then picking a bright cyan color, I'll use airbrush and then just airbrush along where I want some more highlights to be, especially on the clouds and a little bit on the character's head as well. I'll set this layer to add and then add a little bit more highlights here and there. Finally, I'll apply some filters and we're done. And without too much effort, we have a pretty easy blue sky, white clouds background that lets the character shine brightly. While I don't do day pieces very often, it's always fun to draw characters lit up in the bright sunlight. But what if you want to set your character in the night instead of during the day? Well, that leads us to background 2, which is a night stars scene. So like last time, I'll go ahead and make a new layer beneath the character and fill it in with a solid color, this time a dark blue instead of a light blue. Next, I'll go ahead and adjust the hue slightly and also make the color a bit lighter, and then just use airbrush along the bottom of the canvas. If you're following along, you can shift the hue either cooler or warmer depending on what kind of look you're going for. But to start off, I'll do a slightly warmer tone. This creates a nice gradient as if the sun just set. Now to draw on the stars, if you're using Clip Studio Paint or any other program with a spray brush, you can go ahead and use that spray brush and adjust the particle size as well as the particle density, depending on how many stars you want in the sky. Alternatively, if your program doesn't have a spray brush, then you can also do it manually, just by lightly pressing on the canvas and making some stars here and there. The benefit of doing this manually is that you have way more control over the exact size of the stars and exactly where the stars are placed. Another thing that I like to add to some night sky scenes are some shooting stars. After adding some more stars, this is pretty much done, and then you can go ahead and start adding lighting to the character. When drawing character-focused illustrations, when you're putting a character in a background, lighting is half of the work. If you don't add any lighting to the character, it might seem awkward, so to add some shading, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer and clip that to the character layer. Next, I'll go ahead and color pick a purple from the middle of the background, and then just fill that entire layer. And I'll set that to multiply. I'll adjust the colors a little bit further and then add highlights. By making another layer and then clipping that to the character but making sure it's above the multiply layer, I'll go ahead and pick a light purple color similar to the stars, and then just draw in some light from the edges in the back. Since I want to bring some more warmth into the character's face, also on the multiply layer, I'll go ahead and pick a warmer purple and then just use airbrush to bring back some of the warmth back into the character. So on the sky layer below where I drew the stars, I'll go ahead and pick an almost black blue color, just to darken the sky a little bit. This way it brings out some more of the stars. And for a final touch, I'll go ahead and make a new layer below the character, and just using a light purple airbrush, I'll go ahead and add in some backlight. This way the character stands out well against the night sky. To correct the colors a little bit, I just make a new overlay layer and then once again use some airbrush to brush in some different colors to improve the contrast a bit. And after adding some filters, we finished our second background with a night sky star scene. And finally, let's move on to our final background, a sunset scene. So like last time, once again, I'll go ahead and use a layer beneath the character, fill it in with a solid color, and pick out colors for the gradient for the sunset. Since the colors that you can use for sunset vary a lot, I'll go ahead and play with a couple colors here. For now, I settled in on a warmer gradient, going from a purple to a yellowish orange to a bright orange, but I end up changing this later. If you're following along, you can use any sort of sunset colors for the gradient, or use colors from a photo reference if you're struggling. Next, for the lighting effect I have in mind, you need a foreground for this background. This foreground can be anything you want. It could be the ocean, some trees, including deciduous or evergreens, or even some mountains. I also lock transparency on this layer and then add in some orange colors from the sunset. Next, like all the previous times, I'll go ahead and make a new layer, clip that above the character, and set that to multiply. This time, I'll pick a dark grayish purplish color. Next, I'll go ahead and make a new layer, and then pick a really bright orange or red color. Right between where the edge of the sky against the foreground meets the character, this is where you're going to draw a cross shape using airbrush. You want to use the airbrush heavier, along where the sun should be, but lighter on the edges of this line. For lens flare effect, you can also make it slightly heavier, like I'm doing here on the right side. Next, you can just set this layer to add glow, and then also use the airbrush set to erase, and then just correct the shape a little bit here and there. And then also on a new layer, I'll go ahead and finally draw in the sun using a white airbrush to give it that effect of a really bright, shining, setting sun. Since I want the warm tones of the sun to stick out more, I decided to change the gradient of the sunset sky back into a cooler tone. In this step, I also blur the foreground as well. And like one of the earlier demonstrations, I'll go ahead and add some backlight to the character as well, using the same methods, including just drawing along the edges of the character and just making some highlights here and there, as well as making another layer beneath the character for some backlight. And while you could leave it at that, I also feel like the sky is a little bit empty, so I decided to add in some clouds. For the clouds, you can use any textured brush, and then I'm just going to color pick a light yellow for the clouds, just to get that sun shining on the clouds effect. I'll make some streaks with the cloud brush, and then also erase from it to give it a more organic look. And after a few adjustments, we finish our final background demo with a sunset scene. So using the methods outlined in this video, we were able to turn a simple half body into these 3 different scenes. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I would appreciate if you give this video a like, and subscribe if you'd like to see more from my channel. Also, if you'd like to learn more about how I use filters to finish up my art, check out the video linked on screen here. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!